Hey there, welcome to the Table at Central. My name is Isaiah,
And I'm George.
and we're here to dive deeper into the themes, stories, and culture that are central to our church.
Well,
What's up,
welcome
man?
back.
We're here.
We're back at the table
Yes,
after a short hiatus. What, 2 months?
It feels longer than 2 months, though.
Yeah, it felt like eternity. But we're back now.
Yes,
We're back now.
we are.
We are starting a new series on relationships
Yes, we are.
called Me, Myself, and Others.
Who came up with that? Who?
That was actually Pastor Paul.
Come on, Pete
Yeah.
Paul. I see you, Pete Paul. I like that one.
Me,
That's
Myself,
cool.
and Others. I don't know where he got it from, but we'll just say he
Yeah,
came
why can't you just say he
He
created
just came up with
he
it on
just
his
came up-
own.
Yeah, he did his thing. He did his
He
thing.
was deep in prayer.
Absolutely. God gave it to
And
him.
God told him, this is the name of the series.
100%.
I'm excited that we have 8 weeks, 8 different topics. Each topic is just kind of like an aspect of relationships. What's going to be cool is I think the main focus is relationships in marriage, romantic relationships. But I think this is going to be a series that anybody at any stage can learn from, you know.
Yeah.
And all of these topics, all of these aspects are applicable no matter what relationship. It could be to your friendships, working relationships, just any relationship you have in your life.
Yes,
All
sir.
of these things are applicable to every relationship. So I'm excited.
Yeah, so don't feel isolated if you don't have a romantic relationship. You could apply these
Right.
to. You will one day, by faith. But on top of that, I think friends, parents, even parents loving on their kids loving their parents. There's always something to take away from these topics.
Right.
And usually here at the table, what we do is we respond to the sermon that happened the Sunday prior. But we're doing something different this year. We're going to just kind of add our own thoughts, come out of the scripture, talk a little bit about the topic ourselves, almost like a podcast sermon discussion, but
Yeah.
like we're making the sermon at the same time.
Yeah.
I think it'll be cool, gives us an opportunity to get a little bit creative, and we'll see how God will also kind of speak similar things in the podcast that then is also spoken from the stage as
Yeah.
well, because God likes to be thorough like
That'll
that.
be interesting.
Oh.
I'm looking forward to that.
That's gonna be real
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
We like prophetic words here
Oh,
at
yeah, we
Central
do.
Church, baby.
Yeah,
You
we
know
do.
that.
I'm excited. It's gonna be a good season 2 of the table.
Yes, sir.
So
And we got some surprises for them,
we do.
but they're gonna have to just stick around
Just
for that.
stick around. Just come along for the ride.
Absolutely.
You want to dive into the topic for this
Let's
week?
do it. So
Let's do it.
today we are going to be talking about affection. And I hit up George and I was like, I think we should come out of 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 7 and 8. So I want to read it in the modern English version first, and then I'm going to do the TPT, the Passion Translation. So it says, "But we were gentle among you, like a nurse caring for her own children. So having great love toward you, we were willing to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives, because you were dear to us." So that's the MEV. And then the TPT says, "Even though we could have imposed upon you our demands as apostles of Christ, instead we showed you kindness and were gentle among you. We cared for you in the same way a nursing mother cares for her own child. With a mother's love and affectionate attachment to you, we were very happy to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our lives, because you had become so dear to us." And I came out of this verse for affection because I think there's a very distinct line between what the world may think affection is and what godly affection may look like. So we're looking at the word, trying to understand what godly affection may be through Paul's words to the Church of Thessalonica. But when you think of affection in a worldly sense and then in a godly sense, like what's being spoken about here, where do you kind of take this conversation, George?
Do you think there's a big difference?
I do. I'm not going to lie. I
Yeah.
do. I maybe once upon a time it wasn't the case, but in this day and age, yes,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
very much
for
do.
sure.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you. I think this is an interesting one. It's going to be an interesting one. I think here's why it's going to be interesting for me.
Go.
Growing up as a male in a very it wasn't a very affectionate environment. Now as an adult, being married, got a kid on the way, I've actually been thinking about this quite a lot. What does affection actually look like for me today? So I think that there's a difference. I think there's some overlap. But Yeah, I think that there is a difference. There's an overlap.
Yeah, that was a good word.
Yeah, there's overlap. I think where it starts to look like the world is where it gets twisted, or where it's manipulative, or where it's just like a twisted version of how God designed it. I think that anything that we have that is worldly, most things are just a twisted version of what God designed for us.
Yeah.
So you could say the same thing about love. You can say the same thing about sex. You can say the same thing like about really a lot of topics.
Absolutely.
If you wanna sit down and look at the difference between the worldly definition and the godly definition, it's usually the worldly definition is just a twisted, messed up version of the godly way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important for you to define the difference because, you come out of your word to understand it. There's words like kindness and gentleness that Paul uses to describe what it means to be affectionate towards someone. Yeah. But really, it's this idea of, I think the deciding factor is the selfishness versus selflessness. Yeah. I think one is about you and about you feeling a specific way. And being made to feel a specific way. And that's where the manipulation part that you're mentioning can come in. And the other is about meeting someone where they're at and showing that you have care for them. Yeah. And the reason why I say that I think there's a pretty distinct line these days is because, again, we've talked about this here at this table tons of times. We live in a very me focused culture, society where it's like, what can you do for me? Even marriage, like, divorce is more prevalent now than ever. And I think it's because everyone's concerned about what their husband or their wife can do for them. Yeah. It's not about what you can offer or God at the foundation of your relationship, what he's doing to you or through you to your spouse. Yeah. And I feel like that's the same thing with friends. That's the same. Like I want friends that are like me and think similar to me. I want to work around people that are like me.
That put the same effort that I put in. The same
effort I put in. Why am I the only one that... Right. You're not the only one that thinks that. We all think that.
Yeah, we all think that. That's a very normal. It's a normal human thing to battle, especially in relationships. Which I think the reason why this gets really complicated is because relationships can be very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you have to put yourself in this position where another person, what they do and what they say, has some sort of effect on you and on your life. So with affection, I think it's even like hard to, maybe as men, like to admit that we want affection or that we need it. Right? Like this is where it gets kind of complicated because you kind of have to admit that somebody else has some sort of effect on your life and on your feelings and on your thoughts.
Absolutely. And it's a thin line again because we all are built for this level of affection. Right. I think that God designed us for this, right? What's the one thing God said wasn't good was when Adam was by himself, when he was on his own. Yeah. We're designed for it. Yeah. Now I got to admit I need it.
Right.
I'm like, dang, and honestly, bro, I can relate, but I was raised by women. Yeah. Like in the most important years of my life, my father was absent. So I was raised by my mom and my like all of her friends. And I grew up on a college campus with a bunch of young women that saw my mom as a mentor. And so they were like big sisters to me. So I grew up around a lot of estrogen and a lot of emotions and a lot of intentionality about being affectionate. And it's not being this machismo kind of environment as we like joke around about. And I think it's made me extra sensitive to the need for affection, but it doesn't change the fact that it's really hard for me to admit that I need it at the same time.
Yeah, it's one thing to like be okay with giving it, and it's another thing to like have to admit, like, it'd be nice, or I need it.
Absolutely.
As a human being.
Absolutely.
Which is totally normal,
But let's talk about that then. Yeah. Let's talk about like what does affection do to a relationship? What's the impact that it has on relationship? You could either use your own life stories if you want to. You could stay kind of high up with it. Like, what's affection's impact on relationship? Or even if it doesn't exist in a relationship, what's its impact?
I mean, I guess it depends on each person. I think everybody kind of receives affection in different ways, There's a lot of talk about, like, the love languages, like knowing the love languages. And I think really it comes down to knowing the person that you're with, or knowing the person that you're friends with, like whether you're showing affection as a friend
For
or
sure.
to your spouse, to your kids, like just kind of knowing them. And that act of knowing them and what they respond well to is like, it's a sort of intimacy. It's a sort of like showing love. So it's less about like what you're actually doing, and it's more so about like, I know that you're this type of person or you're wired this way, and I know you so well that when I compliment you, you receive that well, and that makes you feel loved.
That's good.
Or when I do things for you, you feel loved. Or when you spend time with me, I feel loved.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think that's important too, is just kind of knowing
It is.
the person that you're trying to show affection to, because everybody kind of thinks differently and feels differently and
Absolutely.
has different backgrounds. Like some people have like negative reactions to certain even
Sorts of
affection. Even like good affection, maybe because of trauma or because of the way that they were raised or whatever, you know, like
Absolutely.
some people get awkward when you try to compliment them or you know try to love them with words. You know, like it happens. Everybody has a different effect. I kind of get awkward too, I think, like with words of affirmation, but deep down inside I'm like, I like it.
You're the best, George. You're
No.
so great, man.
All right, not on camera, dude. Come on. Now I'm all awkward. I'm just gonna look down.
I agree, though. You're hitting a good point, man. I think it's about being sensitive, because if it's not selfish, then you recognize the impact on the person and you understand that. It's almost like you don't. It's like this podcast episode. Like, we're not going to come in here without having some level of an understanding of what we want to talk about, because then you just kind of flounder and you just don't know how to. And I think that it requires intentionality to properly show affection to somebody. And I think that's another thing that the world doesn't tell you. The world just kind of like makes up this idea that you should just know how to affectionately like be with somebody or be around someone because it's on Love Island or because it's on Love is Blind. And the reality is that's not the case. Right. It takes investment, intentionality to get better at how you show affection to someone, and to be intentional about receiving that affection as well, especially if you're somebody, like you're saying, that has some sensitivity. So I see it like a cup almost, and it's like, how can I fill your cup up some? Yeah. And then I look at it from the godly perspective, and it's like, God knows us so intricately. Mm-hmm. You know, the Bible says that he knows every hair that's on our head. Right. You know what I mean? That before we were even born, just conceived, like he knew exactly how our heart would beat, what would make our heart beat. Intentional. He knows everything about us. So when he shows affection to us along our journeys and walk with him and the way he loves us, to even get a fraction, show that a fraction of that level of godly love to other people, man, what a tremendous goal. Can't do it if you're just flying blind and you're not being intentional. Right. And so that's definitely what's convicting about Paul's words for me as well. It's like, am I meeting people with kindness? Am I meeting people with gentleness? Or is this about me? Right. It's about me, myself.
I love what you said, the difference between the selflessness and the selfishness. Yeah. I think affection is kind of like stretching beyond not what you're comfortable with, but like maybe what you've experienced or what you're used to or what you see as affection. Yeah. Like kind of like if you really want to show affection to somebody, it usually requires some sort of like, it's like humility to kind of put yourself in this position to show somebody, like have that intentionality and know how they'll respond. I think a good example is like one of my best friends, my friend Evan, lives in Washington, D.C., different time zone. And one of my best friends, but we don't live in the same place. You know, the only way for us to stay in contact is on our phone. And there'll be days where I think about him and like, I miss him. I want to talk to him. I am not a phone call person. I'm not even really a texting person. Like I don't really enjoy being on my phone or being on the phone or FaceTiming. And like I'll think of Evan. I'm like, I miss him. I want to talk to him. And I'm just like, some days, my selfishness is just like, I'll just wait for him to call me at some point or something. We'll see when I talk to him next. Sure. But lately, because it's like this is a friendship that I want to continue to invest in. When I realize that when I'm in that moment and I'm thinking about him, I'm thinking about like I have to call somebody. It has nothing to do with him. It's just me. It's my issue. It's my problem. Sure. It's not that I don't want to talk to him. It's like it's just me being selfish and not wanting to make a phone call.
Absolutely.
So I just get over it. I'm like, no, I'm just gonna call him. Like I check his location and see where he's at, see if he looks busy or not.
Yeah.
And I just call him, and we'll end up talking for an hour,
Yeah.
2 hours, or whatever, and we end up talking for a while. And that's my way of showing like this, like, hey, I care about you. I'm thinking about you. I want to stay in your life. He calls me a lot because it's no problem to him.
Right.
Like, he doesn't
No,
think
it's
about
just
it.
you with the problem.
It's just me with the problem. Exactly. That's exactly what I mean. Is that to him, he won't think twice about calling me. He calls me multiple times a week. But I see that as like I need to make the effort to call him and just like remind him that I'm trying to make the investment in his life too, and stay in contact with him. And I see like little things like that all over in all of my relationships. I see it in my marriage, and like the little ways that I need to go just beyond what is comfortable or convenient to me to show affection. It's just like showing somebody like, hey, I care about you.
Absolutely.
I love you. And it's not always this extravagant thing. It's like these little things that maybe to us sometimes seem like so insignificant and so small, but to the right person with the right thing means the world,
Absolutely.
and it's what breathes life into a relationship.
Absolutely.
It's what kind of continues to give life in a relationship is when we do these little things. So I think affection can be kind of like this big word and feel kind of like
scary to think
to some people, but like I think it's a lot of small things that it's more so, it's less about what you're doing and more so about the intention that you're doing it with.
A bunch of small surrenders.
Yes. Talk about that.
Yeah, bro. I think that's, the last question I had for you today was like, what does it look like for us to show kind of Christ-like affection to our people? Paul talks about inside, alongside, outside.
Yeah.
That's the vision right now we're having for our church. So when it comes to our families, our tribe, our guests, how do you show Christ-like affection? I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think that you find ways to surrender small with all of these people.
Yeah.
And it'll look different because what you do with your family doesn't look the same as what you do with the guests in your life, the people who are kind of on the peripheral of your life, but it all still speaks of the same God that motivates you. And so what I got, was thinking about as you were talking was, it's like in worship, man, where like you do that one thing that you may feel uncomfortable about doing. Like maybe you don't raise your hands during worship, so you raise your hands a little bit, or, they say, hey, come to the altar. And it's like, that's kind of scary and weird for me to do. But you take that extra step.
Right.
And God's love meets you in that space, and I think God's designed us to have an expansion in our capacity, a capacity of all ways. Yeah. But in order for that to happen, we have to be willing to admit that our capacity does come to an end at some point, right? I end, and then that's when he can begin. My patience runs out, and then that's when his patience comes in. My affection runs out, and now I'm realizing I can move based on an affection that comes from my faith.
That's good.
And so I think like hearing you say that is really good, because I'm just thinking about like ways I get to do that with my wife, ways I get to do that with my friends, and all of it costs me something.
Yeah.
True affection, I think from a godly sense, it is so tethered to the idea of dying to self.
Yeah.
And that's why Jesus, I imagine that he was the warmest presence everywhere he went.
Yeah.
No one wanted to be around him because he was cold. Nah, everyone wants to be around him because he probably had so much of a gravitas and this magnetic presence and warmth.
Yeah.
For you to look at Zacchaeus in the eyes and be like, yo, I'm coming to your house tonight, man. Yeah. We out. Like, oh, you want to show me affection when my community doesn't show me that? He's well researched. He knows our hearts. And then on top of that, there's this intentionality that pushes us to have to go, I do want that. I do need that. And so I think that's what it looks like to have Christ-like affection, is to know that you're trusting God to be able to show it, and trusting God to be able to receive it.
I think that's another aspect of it then. I completely agree. That's great. Another aspect of like the godly versus the worldly, if it's godly, I think it has a big effect. Like it's a difference maker.
Easy.
Because affection can kind of be looked at as like, it's like, well, Valentine's Day is coming up, and it's, it's just like, it's lovey-dovey. What impact does it actually have? But I was thinking, even this morning, I was at the gym and kind of thinking ahead of this conversation, and what is so like we talked about like the small surrenders. It's like these little things, but it's like we talked about last year with the seeds. These little things lead to big things. So
That's true.
if we want to apply the same concept to this, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about affection in some big extravagant way, but what if all of these little things that we choose to do every day, as we show affection to the people around us, what does that compound to? Like, what does that lead to? And one big thing that I was thinking about this morning is, I was thinking about people that maybe didn't grow up in an environment where affection was modeled well. My family has always been very close, and we all love each other, but we weren't the most affectionate in the sense of like hugs and saying I love you.
Sure.
We were ride or die. We just knew it. It was kind of more of like an unspoken thing. We've gotten better at it as we've gotten older and matured. But my parents didn't really grow up like that, so I think it was probably hard for them when we were kids to figure out how to do that, especially my dad. And so I was just kind of thinking through that because I have a son coming in a few months.
Yes, sir.
And so I'm just thinking about like the generational effect of that. And I've watched how my dad has made an effort in the last 27 years of my life, and how he's gone from being a new dad and not really knowing. He basically raised himself. My dad loves to tell this story about how he signed himself up for school, like walked himself to school when he was like 6 years old and signed himself up for school and like raised himself. Like it was a different time, different world in Mexico, like just different environment. And I've seen how like as his kids have gotten older and he's gotten older, he's become like softer.
Yeah, man.
And more affectionate with us.
Yeah.
And I think it's so cool that we have the opportunity, even those of us that maybe when we were kids didn't receive as much affection, we now have the opportunity, especially when you start having a kid.
Yeah, man.
You have the opportunity to change not your history, but you can change your future.
Your future. That's right.
And you can make the difference in somebody else's life.
Yeah, man.
And we can do it for each other. Like even as friends, like maybe when we were kids, we didn't really receive some of these things, but now we can be that for each other.
Yeah, man.
You're married and maybe you come from different worlds. Maybe one of you did grow up in a very affectionate household and the other didn't. And now you get to do that. Share it. Yeah.
Yes.
You have a kid and you didn't grow up in a very affectionate environment, but you have a choice. You can either repeat history with those that come after you, or you can make the difference. And I think that's huge.
That is huge, man.
I think that's a huge vision to have, like overarching vision to have about something that can kind of just be very small and seem insignificant. It's just like, well, I'm just showing love or whatever. But it could be a huge difference. Like I was thinking this morning, like, okay, I'm talking about affection today with Isaiah. How will my son talk about affection? Or how would he talk about it? And he's going to be born this July. How would he talk about it in 20 years? And what stories will he tell about me?
That's a big thought, man.
It's a big thought, right? Like what things am I going to do with my son? How am I going to show that to him?
Yeah.
That's going to affect in 20 years how he's going to treat his spouse, his wife, his kids, in 20, 30 years. Like, that's pretty crazy. Something that seems so small but will eventually compound to something.
That's right.
Lead somewhere. I think that's my encouragement for everybody listening and everybody that's going to be a part of this series is like this could just seem like a very like today type of conversation of like, how am I going to be more loving to my wife? Yes, absolutely. But this could lead somewhere. Think about the implications of your entire family, your kids, your friends, the people that just need it. There's people that need affection around us that we don't even know.
That's right.
We're not even aware of it. And sometimes even just doing something small can change the trajectory for somebody else's life.
I agree, bro. That's so well said. That's it. You just hit the nail on the head. I don't feel like I can top anything that you just said. That was it. The only last thing I'll also say is that the world needs people who have good boundaries with the way that they show affection. And I think that God's people are the exact people that should be doing that. Good. So it's important for us to consider these things because that will then help you to be wise in how you steward the idea of affection as well. Even the idea of like maybe you meet someone who isn't used to it and then you share it with them. and then they're like, ooh, I like the way it felt to
Yeah.
be seen and appreciated by this person, and they kind of come around wanting more.
Yeah.
You get to also be the one that says, hey, listen, you can't always depend on my affection.
Right.
You should get the affection from the Lord. He's who I get my affection from. You know, I'm just the beggar pointing to where the bread is kind of concept, you know. And so all of this is very important. All of this is very big. It can be broken down into small bits, but I'm excited to continue having conversations about these 8 different principles of relationship. I think we need it. All generations need this conversation.
Absolutely.
So it's like, whether you're young, old, this is something that's for you. And we hope that God will speak to you through this podcast and through this series. And I'm excited to be back at the table with you, bro.
Me too. It's good to be back.
Yes, sir.
It's good to be back. We're going to enjoy this series. We are going to have some of the girls are coming back to the table as well. So we're going to switch it up a little bit this year. So I'm very excited about that. But thanks for joining us for this episode of The Table. And we'll see you next time at the table.
See you soon.